Today on Debt Free in 30, we're talking about free money, and it all starts right now.
This is Debt Free in 30. Here's your host, Doug Hoyes.
Free money is the topic today, and my guest is a returning guest who was on show number 160 back in September of 2017. And the title of that show, How One Man Survived a Layoff After 20 Years at Canada's Biggest Company. You remember that show?
I remember that one, yeah. That's
and
a classic.
We also talked about RDSPs I think we recorded two shows in one back in those days. And we're going to talk about that. And then episode number 224, which aired in December of 2018, Chatbots, Helping Your Finances or Upselling. We recorded that in Ottawa. And it seems to me we recorded that show in like November or something, and there was snow on my car when I got up the next morning or something. So that's Ottawa. So that's the previous shows we've done. Tell me who you are and what's happening.
I am Alan Whitton, personal finance raconteur and an observationist, also known as the Big Cajun Man on most social media. Been doing this for 16, 17 years. Doug Hoyes started screen sharing. Goodness gracious.
Well, because you mentioned your blog.
That's true.
Or maybe you didn't mention your blog, but if you didn't, it's the Canadian personal finance blog, CanadianFinances.com.
Yep.
So people have to know how to spell the word Canadian, CANAJUN finances.com. And you've been doing this blog since 1952. Is that correct when you started this blog?
Something like that. Yeah, you can believe everything you hear on the internet.
Absolutely.
That certainly might be the case.
It may very well be the case. And then, as you said on social media, Big Cajun Man is where people can find you.
I'm on Instagram too.
Are you? Well, see, I don't know what that is because I'm.
Well, there you go.
I'm just a young man with a dream.
The young folk use that.
I don't know what all these things are. So we will put links in the show notes to all of those things. You got a ton of good material on there, some of which we're going to reference today. The reason I wanted to have you on today, though, was to talk about free money. Now, of course, we are recording this in the, I guess, is it the summer yet of 2021? It feels like it. We've come through the era of free money during the pandemic with all the government handouts and government support, I guess would be a better way to say it. That's not what I want to start with, though. I want to talk about, either expenses you incur that you don't know. And let's trash the banks. Why don't we just start there? What are fees that you end up paying at the banks that perhaps you're not aware of?
Well, I'll preface this with saying that I am actually a bank shareholder. So I'm a hypocrite, and I'll admit it up front. Bank fees.
And just to interrupt you there, I think pretty much all of us are bank shareholders.
Yes,
because
if you hold an index fund.
Exactly. You hold an index fund. I suspect the Canada Pension Plan has investments in Canadian bank shares. Every Canadian pension fund would have investments in Canadian bank shares. So I guess anybody who expects to retire or has, like you say, a general index fund has shares in banks. So
yes, there is no escaping that one. Much like in the late 90s, you owned Nortel shares.
Ooh.
Much to your chagrin.
Episode 160, you might want to listen to that if you want to hear more about the Nortel story. Well, and Nortel was 97% of the Canadian stock market valuation or something.
Could be. Yeah. And it's what's funny is to see the government bail out all these airlines and other funny companies, and they just they didn't give Nortel nothing, which was interesting, but not part of this. So let's get back to trashing the banks.
There you go. That's what we're here for.
Bank fees. Actually, one of my major sponsors on my website, and yes, I have sponsors. They don't pay me a lot, but I make a couple of bucks here and there, is EQ Bank. So that's an online bank. They've got some services. They've got some fun and games, but all of it appears to be free. You don't have a service fee associated with it. Now we can get into the dingy part of the world and say there really is no free, right? Like free is a relative statement. But you know, most major banks, I've been nailed by Toronto Dominion for $15 a month because I don't carry $5,000 in my checking account, because that's sort of, if you want free banking, you need to tie up $5,000 of your capital in your checking account and never go in the month below that, and you will get free banking. Now, you know, saving $15 a month, that's not a bad thing, but do you really want to have $5,000 that you can't do anything with? Although now that Mr. Hoyes and I already had this discussion, now that I've turned 60, I get a $5 seniors discount. And it's quite annoying to look at my online banking and it says checking seniors discount. And I'm going, this is the first seniors discount I got. So now I pay $10 a month. So, but again, I could save the $10 if I put $5,000 in a banking account. Now, is that a good investment? No. A checking account doesn't pay negative yet, does it?
No, we're not in the area of negative interest rates yet, although that seems to be the way we're going. So what then does one do?
Well, so in about 15 years ago, I used to go to the bank and just bring a list of everything they got wrong for the year. And it usually was about 5 or 6 specific things they just completely got wrong. And they would say, okay, we're going to waive your bank fees for this year. That doesn't seem to be capable anymore. Like it's very hard to get that kind of deal these days. The deals are harder to find unless you're, a really good customer that has lots of money in there, or you have lots. You can prove to them that a lot of money is flying through their bank. So you're going to end up paying that. Or you can go with the online banks like EQ, as I mentioned, or Tangerine, or I think there's a couple of other online banks that you can go with. Or you can go with a credit union. Now, credit unions sound good, and I know a lot of people who use credit unions, except credit unions have the interesting twist that the online banks are federally insured. Your funds are federally insured, whereas credit unions are a provincial thing, so they're not federally insured. Do you want to put your money in something that isn't, your $100,000 isn't insured in case the world goes crazy and your bank goes bankrupt? Although I'm suspecting if the banks go bankrupt and my money disappears, I don't know. What do you think, Mr. Hoyes?
Yes, I think if that happens, we're all in trouble. So what you're saying is we should all put our money in Bitcoin. Is that what I'm interpreting from your comments here?
So I'm lucky to know, my major skill in life is to know really smart people and latch onto them and never let go. And they really are annoyed by that. But so I know one of the strongest cryptographers in Canada. His view of Bitcoin is it's just he doesn't completely buy into the concept. I think would be the safest bet I could say about it. It's a monetary thing. Is it something it's not an investment. It's a money thing. If I bought it 10 years ago, yes, I'd be filthy stinking rich if I bought. And I know instances where people, I guess back then there were a couple of magazines where they said you can only pay for your subscription with Bitcoin, and they ended up buying 2 Bitcoins. They used one and they had one lying around, and suddenly it's worth ridiculous amounts. But this is not an investment, much like bear shorting things or buying GME or the other craziness that's going on right now. This is not investing. This is gambling.
Yeah,
if you think of it as gambling, that's fine.
Yeah, a lottery ticket is also not an investment.
No,
might turn
or
out,
a pension plan either.
Exactly right. Yeah, that's kind of the problem right there. So
yes,
so back to the bank fee question then. So if I want to have my money in a bricks and mortar bank,
mm-hmm.
if I want to, let me rephrase it. If I want to have a bank account at a bricks and mortar bank, then
mm-hmm.
it's going to cost me money because they have to make money. So my choices are I either pay the $15 a month, or if you're old, then you only have to pay $10 a month or whatever the deal is, or I have to put a significant chunk of money, $5,000 or whatever it is, in order to get the deal. So the advantage of using a bricks and mortar bank is if you are renting a new apartment and the landlord says, I need a money order for first and last month's rent and I need it this afternoon, it's a lot easier to walk into a bricks and mortar bank and get that than it is to go to Tangerine, for example, or Simply Financial or one of the online banks. They'll get you a money order, but they'll courier it to you. You might not get it till the next day.
Yeah.
Harder to do wire transfers, that sort of thing. So is it worth investing $5,000 to save $15 a month? That's really the math question then, isn't it?
Yeah. And I mean, you could make up weird models in your mind and say, well, it's like interest. I'm getting $15 a month. Well, no, you're not. You're not paying $15 a month. So it's not really a growth thing. It's just not a shrinkage thing. So I don't know.
Yeah, and $15 a month, if you multiply that by 12 months and then divide that by $5,000, that's like a 3.5% interest rate return, according to my calculator where I just did the math here. So
but you don't get that money. You just don't lose it.
You don't lose it. That's exactly right. So are you then more on the side that, well, go to one of the online banks then, or a credit union or something where they don't have that level of service charges?
I would say yes. I just have an issue with paying ridiculous sums of money for things that used to be free.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, my $15 is actually an interesting number, because I know someone else who pays $30 a month for his bank, to which I'm going, what?
And is that just because the banks put that fee in there and he's never said anything about it?
There's implied that he gets better service, to which I'm going, you get better service when you have a lot of money in the bank. They're if for the people who still go into banks, the teller gets either a rating of some kind. There's a code on the screen that says, Mr. Hoyes is a man of substance and a man to be respected. Let's talk to them nicely, and also try to get them to get 4 more credit cards and a line of credit and things like that. But to be, whereas, me, when I graduated from university and I had credit card debt, and, it was sort of if it was a 5-star thing, there'd sort of be a negative star saying, yeah, just get this deadbeat out of here. We can't sell anything to them. Off we go. Now, this was back in the 80s. So
yeah, and you're right. The bank teller's machine, their screen will say, oh, this person needs a credit card, a loan, a mortgage. We need to put them into our investment products, whatever. And that's how they make money. Yeah. And my advice to people has always been, figure out what you need in a bank. If you get paid electronically by your employer, and if you send e-transfers for your rent and you use your debit card for everything else, then one of the free banks is fine. Why bother paying service charges? However, if you're constantly sending money orders, wire transfers to, I guess, buy your Bitcoin, and you need, foreign currency, you're always getting UK pounds or whatever, and you need a bricks and mortar bank, well, then I guess perhaps it's worth paying for it. But you're right, most people don't need that level of service. Now, you hit on another area, and that was, you said the word investment. So one of the things when I go into the bank teller, because they say, as you say, oh, he's a man of substance and means, I think is how I was described earlier.
And to be respected.
Be respected. They say, oh, we would like you to buy one of our mutual funds. So what's the problem with that? Sounds pretty good. What am I missing?
Well, and, I've written countless words about when I first got set up RESPs for my daughters. And this is at least 30 years ago. And this was at Canada Trust. Set up an RESP. Oh, okay. Well, we set up an RESP. And you're buying these mutual funds, and it's fine. I knew nothing about nothing. Fine and dandy. Eventually, I sort of met a whole bunch of really smart people again, something that I excel at. Finding smart people and listening to them. Okay, well, finding smart people, I don't always listen to them. This is part of my problem. And understanding what index funds were, right? Understanding that as my Canada Trust became my TD mutual funds, and it became the Investor Series funds, which if you look them up on the TD mutual fund websites, you'll look at the management fees on the Investor Series mutual funds, and they're up at the high level compared to the E-Series, which are funds that, are supposed to compete with ETFs and things like that. And they're index funds and have much lower management fees. In fact, you can get things with even lower management fees than that. But again, mutual funds is a part of the let's make money. The bank makes money on them when you buy them. The person that sells it to you makes money on them, whether they tell you or not. And if anyone says, "Oh, I might get my investment advice for free," how does this person live? Do they own a house? I noticed they drove a Tesla. Where did that Tesla come from? Was it given to them by Elon Musk? I don't think so. So there's a lot of hidden fees in the whole investing world, not just for real investors or, people who really like investing that go to a Quest Trade or a TD Direct Line or Nesbitt Burns or whatever BMO's trading thing is, and paying the $9 or $4.50 per transaction for that kind of stuff. The mutual fund industry, for RESPs especially, is a cash grab. There's money to be made and everyone's going to make it. There's free money in there in grants and bonds, but you better be careful you don't I believe I wrote an article where, management fees are the worm in the apple of the RESP. Like your money just gets scraped away. Now, yeah, okay, our RESP managed or investment field is about 18 years, 19 years, and you'll start taking money out at the most, maybe 23, I think is where you have to start taking money out or do something with it. So if you're buying mutual funds or GICs, I guess you should be okay. But if it's in one of these trading accounts that the banks are going to push you into, like I'm pretty sure BMO has that, TD definitely has it. TD Mutual, if you walk in and say, I want an RDSP at a TD bank, they will automatically point you at a mutual fund salesperson. And that's what they're going to sell you. And if you say, I'd like to have the E-Series accounts, goodness, the back flips, front flips, and pain you have to go through to get that is not straightforward.
So but just in rough numbers, what is the difference in fees between option A and option B that you just mentioned there? The regular and the E-Series, for example.
The investment series were at the 2 and 2.5% yearly management fee on them. The E-Series are down at the 0.7, 0.5, I believe. They may be higher, they may be a little lower, but it's like 3 to 4 times cheaper, 3 to 4 times less drag on the money you put in there. And they're also index funds, right? Because mutual funds, inevitably, the first thing they're going to say is, you need a balanced investment plan. And their balanced investment mutual fund inevitably has one of the highest management fees on it because, of course, it's balanced. And I have to go in there. Some smart people have to go in there and change how you invest here, change how you invest here. Oh, it's not good to buy that. We'll go, but and they think up smart things. So you're paying good money for these investments, is the story you're told. I will say hokum to that, but that's my opinion.
Yeah, and again, I guess the math is the math. If I'm paying someone 2.5% a year to manage my money and they're increasing my returns by 10%, sounds like a good deal. I think the point you're making is that if I'm in a balanced fund or an index fund, and an index fund is literally just whatever the index is. So if you're buying the Toronto Stock Exchange 300 Composite Index, then anybody can do that because it's already a predefined population. And so if I buy that as compared to a managed fund or a quasi-managed fund, are my returns going to be that much different? The argument is not much, I guess, and certainly not 2.5% difference. And therefore, you're better off going with the lower option. Now, you mentioned RESPs. So let's get back to our theme here of free money. Explain Well, first of all, what is an RESP? And then tell me about the free money.
Registered Education Savings Plan. It's been around since the 70s, maybe even earlier. I have no idea. I started finding out about them later, or when my kids were born. And of course, the first thing when your kids are born, they'll hand you this weird thing about, this alleged RESP thing that's run by some kind of bizarre organization. Let's not even talk about that, because we'll spend the rest of the day on that. Typically at RESP, you can put in up to $2,500 a year, up to the age of 17 for your kids. And the government will then kick back 20% of that, or $500 in free money and in a grant. Now, with an RESP, the growth of what you've invested in and the grant money are actually going to be taxed, but they're going to be taxed in your kids' hands when they get to a post-secondary program. Now, don't get hung up on they have to go to university. No, they can go to college. They can go into other programs. There's a whole bunch of programs that you can look at on the government site to say, if you're going to become like an electrician or something like that, that money can be used for that. So you just have to get proof that your child is in that to get the money out. So there's that aspect of things where you're getting $500 a year free that you can then reinvest, and that'll grow in itself. So you can get up to about $8,500, because typically grants stop around age 17 of the child. You put any more money, you just won't get any more grants. But there's also a Canada Learning Bond, which the banks never talk about, because the people that walk in that would benefit from the Canada Learning Bond, the teller is not going to tell them, hey, you should set up an RESP for your kids, because there's no money in that for them. It is for very low income people. And there's a $2,000 lifetime bond that will be paid into that over time. So even if you don't put any money in there, there will be $2,000 more in there. So if all you can put in is nickels and dimes, you can still get, if you're a low income family, $2,000 more for a post-secondary program. Don't even call it an education, call it a program. There are a lot of different programs. Don't get hung up on my kid has to go to the University of Waterloo or Wilfrid Laurier or Queen's. Your kid can go to Algonquin. Your kid can go into a lot of training, different training programs. So it's free money in that way. And I get kind of miffed about the whole Canada Learning Bond thing, and the banks just don't talk about that. And it's not sold very well by anybody else either.
Well, and you hit the nail on the head. The people who qualify for that are not the rich people. And so that's not who the banks can make money off of. And I've always been a believer in having a family RESP as opposed to an individual one for each of your 12 kids. Do you agree with that or disagree with that?
So what happened with me was we had individual RESPs for each of my daughters, and we actually ended up using all three of them. But the family one does have the advantage of being able to slide money around or changing beneficiaries and things like that. So you have more flexibility in terms of your investing. If your RESP, if we're going to say flexibility, and I'll just go back to the whole investing thing. If you've opened this with a bank mutual fund RESP account, which is a type of things, you're going to be able to only invest in that bank's mutual funds, right? That's a painful thing at times, unless your bank offers index funds or like TDE series or something similar to that, which I'm sure Bank of Montreal has, but they don't advertise either. It's better to have an RESP with something that gives you more flexibility in what you can invest in. You can buy whichever index fund you like. You can buy ETFs. You can buy the Vanguard ETFs, which are incredibly low management fees and have proven over years to be good investments, in the market. Now you'll end up maybe paying a few actual fees where they'll charge you because it's a trading account. It's not this account. But flexibility of the family account RESP is great. Flexibility in what you can invest in is also important, but it's kind of hard when you've walked in and someone's already latched you into this and, oh, you're putting in $50 a paycheck or $100 a paycheck so that you get to your $2,500 a year, so that you get your $500, and it just works. It's easy, but you got to look at the yearly statements that says, oh, you paid this much in management fees.
Yeah, and that's a very good point that you're making. It's not just the vehicle, but what you can invest within the vehicle, because an RESP, an RRSP, a TFSA, an RDSP is just a container that you put stuff in. So,
right.
And I totally agree as well with your statement that you don't want to be making a decision when you're under pressure with the person sitting right there saying, here, sign this piece of paperwork. So I will put the plug in again for your website, where you have a very detailed homepage, if you will, on RESPs with tons of links about how to set them up, all the things to think about, how they work, what's covered, the whole bit. So before you go and set them up, and I agree, you don't want to be setting up with one of these, I guess they're cults. I don't know what you would call them.
I don't know what they are.
Yeah, where you're putting in these door-to-door salespeople selling you these educational funds. No, you want to be more in control of it. Now, the final topic I want to talk to you about, and again, you have it, right on your website, right at the very top, is RDSPs. And I think, again, this is what you and I talked about 4 or 5 years ago when you were first on the podcast, the Registered Disability Savings Plan. And again, you got tons of details here. What is it, first of all, and who is eligible for it? So can I set this up just for my kid, for myself? How does that work?
So a registered disability savings plan. Someone needs to have a disability that's recognized by the CRA. Now, it's not as easy as it sounds, but it's not as hard as it sounds either. So you need to get yourself a disability tax credit. Typically, the forms, there's a T2201, are filled in by either a doctor, a nurse practitioner, that will outline what the disability is and why this is something that will impede day-to-day life, and thus the person is disabled. And it ends up becoming a very semantic discussion of, is this a disability? Is this not a disability? There are obvious cases where the disabilities. You've got people in the armed forces who've lost limbs because of war and things like that. Although I have heard of instances where someone got a note saying, can you please confirm that you're still disabled after they lost a leg, which, okay, that the CRA is full of fun and insane stories like that. But more to the point, in my instance, I have a son that's on the autism spectrum. Now, he's doing very well, but my wife did an incredible amount of work to make sure that we got the disability tax credit set up. And then she said, well, there's this registered disability savings plan. And this is an incredibly long-term savings plan. It is designed to put money away for the disabled person for when they get older. It is not a short-term savings thing at all. The penalties involved to take money out early are incredible. But that's because that's the way it's designed. They don't want you to take the money out early. They want you to put it away, and they'll, depending on your income levels, they will give you grants and they will give you bonds on the basis of income. Now, typically for a child, it will be the parents' income until they turn 17. The child turns 17. If the parents turn, anyway, let's not go there. Then after that, it's the beneficiary's income that it's based on, and grants will typically go up in that instance, because in my instance right now, for every $1,000 I put into my son's RDSP, I get an extra $1,000 thrown on top. That's it. I put any more money in there, the government's not throwing any more money in there. I can put more money in there, viewing it as a long-term savings thing, but there won't be any grants added to that. When my son turns 18, his income levels will be much lower, so the grants and the matching amounts will increase. But I get every year, we get a statement saying you can put in $1,000 and we will match it for $1,000. So that's the starting point. But the disability tax credit, to get back to your original question, is the starting point. You have to have this disability tax credit from the CRA saying your child or yourself are disabled. And then you can set up the RDSP. The RDSP itself is not a I don't know. The banks are not doing their best job on this.
Yeah, and again, it sounds to me like this is an area where you're going to have to roll up your sleeves, do some research, and go to your blog. A lot of it's laid out there, but who qualifies? What are the advantages? How does it work? What institutions can I then set one up with? But the way you're describing it, there are significant benefits over the long term, both in terms of tax sheltered investment accumulation, but also the amount that the government puts into it. So if you have any sort of disability, it's something to look into. So this is something that obviously I can set up for my child. Is it something I can set up for myself?
Yes, if you're over 18.
If I'm over 18.
Disabled.
Is it something, is there anybody else I can set it up for? Could I set it up for my spouse?
Could be, as long as the person involved has the disability tax credit verification from the CRA. That's the starting point. That's
the key to it. And so, and again, I believe, CRA has some pretty extensive information on their website, which you link to from your website, that kind of spells that all out. And with the RESP, if I have very low income, there's the Canada Learning Bond. With an RDSP, if I have very low income, does that help?
There is a bond. There is a bond that will be put in there as well. But again, given the banks, like when we opened the RDSP, this was 2008, 2009, it had just been sort of amalgamated, put together. And, we weren't the first person with TD Direct Line to open it with. So we opened this with TD Direct Line. Again, I don't want to be advertising for TD Direct Line, but they're one of the few trading houses that allows you to create an RDSP. Certainly we were the first person in our area of Ottawa that did it, because the amount of paperwork, and the poor woman at the TD branch had to go through and there were countless flubs, missteps, but eventually it got opened up, and it is a trading account. And because I have enough money with TD Direct Line, there are no fees on my RDSP account. I don't know what the RDSP or the fees would be if you just had an RDSP with TD Direct Line and nothing else. There may be fees involved with that. Anyway, getting back to the RDSP itself, yes, there are bonds for low-income folks. It's not easy for low-income folks to get this stuff up, and I'd like to spend more time doing that. And if there are a lot of people who are trying to help out with that, so spreading the word about this is important. You and I talked about the importance about the bankruptcy rule changes. It used to be that the RDSP was just not mentioned anywhere. So if there was a smart person who was part of the bankruptcy proceedings and said, hey, that money over there, can I have it? The banks didn't really have anything that said, no, that is a registered disability savings plan. That is now entrenched in the RDSP rules. It is not available to bankruptcy proceedings. That money is sheltered, much like, you can tell me if I'm wrong, the RRSP. Is an RRSP sheltered from bankruptcy or not?
An RRSP is sheltered except for the contributions you've made in the last 12 months.
And I would assume an RDSP would be the same kind of rules?
Yes, and what I will do is I will put in the links to the show notes again, the detailed article that we've written on this on our website. In fact, we talked about this, on the podcast, but then we've also updated it with, a bunch more recent information. I think whenever you get into an area like this, you want to make sure you talk to a professional. And this is, I think, both on the investment side and then on the insolvency side. Okay, I have an RDSP or an RESP or an RRSP or a TFSA or any one of these other initials. If I get into trouble and have to file bankruptcy, what happens? You want to make sure you understand those rules very clearly before you make any particular decisions, which is why in a lot of cases people file a consumer proposal instead of a bankruptcy. But you are correct. The treatment of an RDSP is a lot different in a bankruptcy now than it used to be. So, which is, I think, a positive sign. So,
well, it allows for certainty, right? Because people with disabilities, there's a lot of uncertainty dealing with just day-to-day stuff. So knowing that this money is at least safe in that aspect is important.
Yeah, it makes a big difference. So, well, we've covered a lot of ground there. And I guess if I had to summarize what we've talked about, there are a bunch of things. Here we go. I'm going to summarize it by saying there are a bunch of things out there that you can access, but they don't make it easy. They don't. Nope. They don't put it on a silver platter for you, and so you're going to have to dig around. And you alluded to the fact that if you're rich and powerful and have teams of accountants and lawyers, it's a lot easier to figure this stuff out. And people who are not in that category are disadvantaged. But as you said, that's why I like to have you on this podcast to talk about this. And that's why these resources are available. What final comments do you have on that?
I have one more point to make on the RDSP. That there have been changes to the disability tax credit rules. Remembering that it used to be if you lost your disability tax credit, then this happens for people on the autism spectrum or other brain injury or brain issues, you would have to collapse the RDSP within a year. Those rules are now changed. The RDSP can stay intact for a while until the person turns 60, I believe. Because the view is, at least the opinion I've got from one person who I think who I trust very much on this, so there's my RDSP guy, is the view is if you've lost the disability tax credit, you will more likely than not be able to get it back. Like very few people become undisabled or cured per se, if you want to call it that. So that's an important change that is now in place as well for the RDSP. But if you really want me to end up with a pithy statement, there is no free money. And as soon as you hear something is free, the first question you ask is, who made money on this being free? And then you'll go off in the weird world that I live in, because every time I see something is free, I just go, okay, how is this free? Like, is it because it fell off the back of a truck free? Or is this because someone else is the amount of money you're paying for it, or, it's not free at all. So.
Yeah, I totally agree. Nothing is free. Someone's paying for it somewhere. It's like all these free brokerage things where you can trade stocks on your phone. I wonder how they can make money when it's free. Well, do a little research and you can see that they're making tons of money. Thank you very much. They're doing it in more hidden ways. So, well, I think that is an excellent pithy statement to end it on. So how can people troll you, track you, find you? What's the best way to do it? Is it MySpace, AOL? Where can people find a 60-year-old?
Surprisingly, I am there as well. I don't think I'm on MySpace anymore, but I do still have an AOL account.
There you go.
Really disgusting. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Instagram, although I don't really use it as much. Twitter is my main social media kind of thing. There is an email address, Big Cajun Man at CanadianFinances.com, that you can send an email to. I will attempt to reply. I get asked a lot of advisory things, and I don't like giving out advice because I'm afraid I'm wrong, or someone's going to become litigious and say, you told me this, and it wasn't. So I have a level of paranoia on that thing. But if it's sort of how the hell do I get started? I'll certainly point you at articles and talk to you, because I'm not the only RDSP person out there. There's people like Milburn Drysdale who works on the BC side of things and has a lot of my stuff is cribbed directly from his work. So, we're all sort of spreading this information around as best we can. I mean, I've stolen Well, a lot of the stuff I've also written down, I've stolen from my wife. I must give that credit too, because she did a lot of this work and a lot of the research up front. I mean, I just sit here and write stuff down that she tells me, oh yeah, this is the case. I'm going, okay, well, sounds good to me. So I'm trying to help out as much as I can in those situations. I've stopped writing about as much about, is Bitcoin the thing you should be investing in? No, but I don't write about that stuff because I'm just another idiot talking about it. The RDSP. I'm trying to make sure that people who are disabled, and I mean, low income people that are disabled need help, and it's not forthcoming from a lot of different places. So we got to do something here.
Absolutely. Anything we can get the word out to get the word out is a good thing. So the website is CanadianFinances.com. I'll put a link to that in the website. On Twitter, Big Cajun Man, and you'll have to send me your Instagram link because I don't know what that means. So I don't know how that works.
On Facebook too.
And
we're everywhere.
I only know certain things, but send me all the links. I'll put them in the show notes. And Alan Whitton, thanks very much for being here today.
Well, thanks for inviting me and allowing me to babble on about all my odd tendencies and weird concepts. Most other people don't, sort of invite me occasionally on their podcast because they're just going, we can't do this too often. It's just.
Well, and we have you on every 2 years. So, I mean, well,
there you go. See,
that's probably the perfect interval. So, Alan Whitton, thank you very much. And as I say, I'll put links to everything in the show notes. And for those of you watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe and hit the bells and buttons and everything else that's there. And that helps get the word out. Absolutely. We want to get the word out, and particularly about things about like RDSP that are there to help people who need the help. That's why we do it. That is our show for today. Thanks for watching and listening. Until next week, I'm Doug Hoyes. That was Debt Free in 30.